let me set the scene a little bit. The title of the talk was a little bit about like, hey, you want to go with the reliability from something manual to more automatic, and these days, especially like you go on LinkedIn or any other place where like people run around into marketing like me, a term you hear a lot is AI SRE. I hope anybody heard about AI SRE already? Somebody did not hear about it? And the interesting thing about it is like when you hear AI SRE, your first thought is like we are replacing SREs with AI and like everything is done. Like this is the magic that AI promises us everywhere, right? The interesting thing is like there's no AI developer. It's called developer tools for AI tools for developers, something like that. So this is a little bit strange. And in my experience, what people mean when they say AI SRE, there's something like, hey, you have your inputs, your alerts, your prompts, your events, and then you send them to an LLM agent, right? And you give this agent then a bunch of tools. So your observability, for example, Bronto, it's one that you can use, the best that you can use, there's others as well, of course. And then, of course, you have the cluster MCP, you can talk with the cloud, you can talk with GitHub, whatever comes to your mind, right? And those are the amount of tools. And then, of course, you can send out an output. Right? In the ideal version, everybody talking about AI SRE, the solution, the output is a solution, right? They say like, oh, I don't know, I got an alert that my response time is up 500 milliseconds. Here, by the way, the output is like scale this net service by a factor of 2 or something. So that's the big vision. I think we all know LLMs and AIs that like, yeah, very often what they come back with is a bunch of hypotheses. Where they say like, hey, it's maybe that, it's maybe that. Oh, you're absolutely right, I was totally wrong. But if you look at that, this is not something you're probably surprised to see, right? This is just an agentic loop like, I don't know, who of you has built his own agent already? Like something like, I mean, they look all like that, right? You have some inputs, you have the agent, you have the output. And I could do a whole talk about only that thing. Because the first generation of solution was like, a lot of vendors, especially in the observability space, but the whole incident management, whatever space, the very first iteration of that was like a chat box, like ChatGPT, and then you had to type into it like, hey, tell me why do I have a spike here at 3 a.m. in the morning? And then it's like running and telling you like, yeah, here's the reason for the spike. And I was wondering like, why do I need to tell it about the spike, right? This is like, it feels strange, right? And this is what I really want to talk about today a little bit more in detail, is I think this whole term is a little bit off, right? The one thing is like, what I just talked about is incident response. This is not SRE, right? I mean, everybody here in the room who does SRE or part-time SRE, I mean, some teams don't have dedicated SREs, you know that like taking care of reliability is much, much more than taking care of your incidents. And the other thing is like, you also know that AI is one tool among many, right? And I mean, we did not even talk about it, but in your talk you just said like, hey, think about your constraints, about your environment, about the problem you're solving, the solution that you need. This is the same thing, right? It's a tool. It's the one thing that you really pick among many. And so the one thing I would wish for is that people would stop saying AI SRE and saying AI informed SRE. But I'm not here to change that. And this is a battle I'm not going to fight, right? I mean, there's the ones you have to choose. So you will hear me say AI SRE, you will see me maybe in the future write about AI SRE. I'm not really here to stop that. It's just one thing I want to make you conscious about is that really set the scene. And I think I really want to compare this to, and in the next slide we'll understand it better, is like, think about a car, right? We think about autonomous driving, right? So the classic thing is like I choose the human as driver, and here what I meant like with being experimental. So let me see if I can drive this car to its goal. Yeah, I can kill those frogs. So as a human, we're really good at driving cars and killing frogs, right? The wild thing is like nobody in the automotive industry would come to the idea and say like, you know what? We get rid of all these things in our car, and all we do is like put an LLM behind the driver's seat and just let it run towards the goal. Right? Nobody would be doing that. So yeah, you're absolutely right. I should not have driven off this road. So I mean, you killed like how many frogs? It's not okay. Why I'm talking about that. So I like really comparing AI SRE or any kind of like hey, we will want to build towards autonomy with what other industries are doing, especially like automotive industry, right? I mean, we are talking about, since when are we promised self-driving cars? 20 years now? I don't know. I remember like I was a child back then, and this is 30 years ago, something like that. If we could look at a car today, right, there's a lot of things that are not AI, right? So automatic gearbox, they have been around for how many years? 50 years, something like that. Rain sensors, they're not AI driven. I mean, you can probably drive them via AI or maybe via camera. I feel that Tesla is doing that, like they use the camera for the rain sensor or something like that. The whole anti-lock brakes, right? I mean, there's no AI in that. And a very important one is door handles. I will get towards the end to that. It's very good that there's no AI in your door handles, right? But at the same time, there is a lot of AI nowadays in our cars. It's not necessarily LLMs, but there's like adaptive cruise control. My most recent car has something of that. I don't want to live it anymore, right? You can put it in and say like, yeah, follow this car in front of you, and it just does that, right? Lane keeping, also very convenient. Self-parking, I must admit I have not tried this out, another thing, right? You can do your vision model and whatever. And the point I want to make here really is, if you think about it, and this goes back to exactly the point, like autonomous driving is a thought through thing where people, smart engineers, say like, hey, what are the AI building blocks and what are the non-AI building blocks that we want to combine, right? And the thing I want to talk about today is the thing that I'm contributing to. So at the CNCF level, so the Cloud Native Compute Foundation, there is a so-called technical advisory group, Operational Resilience. And in this group, we try to put out some kind of white paper framework. We want to, let's say, do something similar that the automotive industry is doing. So they have some kind of levels of autonomous driving. They have some kind of matrix where they talk about like, hey, what does it mean to drive an automobile automatically? Here the question is now more, what does it mean to do service automatically, right? So what are the building blocks for that? This is my topic today, and this is, as I said, what we work on this white paper. And a little bit here, this is really like advertising this work that we are doing. It's very much work in progress. So I did a similar talk like that, I think 3 or 4 months ago, and the slides look very different. We are still, a lot of those things are work in progress. I think it's something worth doing, have a common understanding of what it means like to reach those different levels. So I think those levels might not be really surprising to you, right? Because where we start is of course manual work, right? I mean, there's something going on your server, like your disk is full. Okay, you go to your machine and you just delete random files. I just did it a minute ago with my phone. I had to delete some files. That's very manual, right? The interesting part is like, how do I level up, right? How do I go from level 1 to from level 0 to level 1? And that's still also very simple, right? It's just code, right? I mean, those of us who have been doing this for many years and decades, one of the things everybody has been doing at some point very quickly is like, you know what? This workflow here, I can turn this into a script, right? I can write a script that scans my server, looks for files I no longer need, etc., etc. And then you have your repository of one-off tasks scripted that you can run. And then the next step is, of course, that you say like, wait a minute, I can automate that. So if a third event happens, I want to run this script, right? And there's, of course, different ways of scripts. And I think a version of a script that's always having a particular value is a script that has no side effects. We call it here linear automation. Who of you has done functional programming in their life? I love it. Like when you asked this question like 10 years ago, everybody would have said like, who did Haskell? I stopped doing it. Still from time to time, I open it up and play around with it. I think it's fantastic, right? Because you do those things where you know, like, I put in A and I get out B every time I do it, right? That's the very first version where we do automation. You don't think about like any kind of side effects. But at some point, of course, it becomes really interesting, right? There's, of course, conditional automation, right? Where we say like, hey, something happened, like your error rate went up, or your response time went up. And then, like, you treat different situations differently, right? You say like, oh, it's 100 milliseconds, so maybe I don't need to do anything. Oh, it's 2 seconds, so maybe I should, I don't know, scale up my service or roll back my last release or something like that. And then, of course, high think this is more the level where LLMs come into place, right? And this is definitely more the place where we're living in today. But this already happened before we had LLMs, right? There's a lot of machine learning, there's a lot of dynamic algorithms that you can use. So you can say like, oh, I'm not only doing something like static values, I maybe do some dynamic learning, some dynamic baselines, some standard deviations, and I use that kind of information to make decisions, right? Which especially makes a lot of sense. You have certain load patterns and then you want to react to that and say like, hey, I'm going to scale things up or scale them down, and that makes a lot of sense. Now we have LLMs already. The big question is like, how do we go now to something where we say like, you know what, I can run this thing fully autonomously, right? What are we missing here? The really honest answer is like, I don't know. Right? I mean, I would not trust an LLM to run my K8s cluster right now, right? I mean, I'm running LLMs to do all my work these days, but like, there's a lot of human in the loop, on the loop, off the loop, somewhere in the loop with a human and a machine. It's something we learned over the last few years. The big question is like, how can I remove myself? There's technology, I feel like there's something missing, right? There's technology missing, maybe something a little bit more deterministic. Maybe we need to learn a little bit better how those LLMs work or don't work, and in what situations we can trust them and not trust them. That's what I put here, and this is really like a lazy excuse because I don't have a good answer. It's trust, right? So how can we make a system that we trust that it makes good decisions, right? That we build a system that is self-healing. There's also a term like, it's funny, like I went to university in like, okay, now I'm giving away my age a little bit, like 20, 25 years ago. People said like, oh, we have been talking about this 20, 25 years ago already. So this is not a new thing, right? We have a better feeling, I hope, these days to get there, or what maybe will never get us through. Because I think that's extremely important, and then I will also dig into this even more, is like adding those things adds complexity. I mean, we all know this, and since most of you have done functional programming, I'm not telling you anything new. I mean, that's why we are doing certain things that way, that we keep them linear, because we say like, hey, we want to get not too many side effects into a system, because complexity makes things fun. Okay, so this is, let's say, the big vision of the white paper that we're working on, right? So we want to say like, hey, we now have defined those 5 levels. But what is an SRE doing? And we started mapping that out, and over time we realized like, we can probably never give a complete list of that, right? I mean, there's tasks and things, and like the site reliability engineering is a discipline, right? And it's very different from company to company what people are doing. We try to get a broad idea. The one thing I want to call out again is like, when you hear someone say AI SRE, many of them, or most of them, sit somewhere here in this right corner where they say like, oh, we do incident response, right? I mean, I need to be honest, like, full effect, right? Many of them also now get into incident prevention, right? I mean, you can do really good things with that nowadays. You say like, hey, I help you with that. But there's so many more things. Instrumentation, right? Like, how do I add my OpenTelemetry, my code, right? That's not something an AI SRE is doing. This also goes back to this whole discussion of like, should I have one agent doing all of it, different agents doing different things? And there's amazing teams out there that are building agents and tools for instrumentation with LLMs, right? And you can do this for resource management, capacity planning, etc., etc. So this is a whole map of things that you can do and should be doing, right? But let's maybe take a few examples, right? To make it a little bit more tangible, and also to, again, get back to a little bit of gamification. I think the simplest version of that is like, or the simplest example I could come up with is like scaling a service. And I understand it's much more complicated than looking at the load and the response time, because there's like a trillion things you have to look at, right? If we go back to like this, hey, I have to do this manually, let's see how good I'm today, then I see like, hey, here's my load, here's my response time, oh, and suddenly it's going up, so I need to manually maybe acquire some service, Amazon or whoever is your provider. That's going to work, right? I mean, I try to talk and to click at the same time, and try to catch up with that thing. So yeah, we wasted 800 euros, we lost 700 customers. Of course, nobody's doing that, right? Nobody's doing that. I mean, it's just like giving you this feeling of like, yeah, I actually want something that does this for us automatically. Right? And then, of course, the next thing is like, hey, I have a script for it. Still, the human is doing the work, right? I mean, still, it's like, oh, I need to click a button, and then it's figuring out that part for me, which is already a little bit better. I can talk, look at it, and now at some point, hopefully, it should move, and I can press this button a few times. I think we are doing better this time. Yeah, only 340 and something customers lost. Now, of course, you can go through those different levels, right? I mean, we can have something that tries to scale automatically, and as I said, this is really more for giving you the feeling of what I'm talking about. It's like, hey, this is now linear, so it can only do one thing. So every time it adds one service or removes one service, it's just like, really, it's worse than what I did. It's a lot of money wasted. Yeah, I think the point I want to make is now that when we do that at some point get really to a point where the system is not doing a bad job, and we're not having an LLM at all, right? I mean, I think something like that. And here's probably someone who's better expert on auto-scaling than me, but I guess there's not a lot of need for LLMs in the auto-scalers, right? I mean, there's some sophisticated methods, and we can see this hopefully at the next level, where we can say like, hey, here's some machine learning, some algorithms that we can apply, do that. One thing that also you see now, but we don't have trust, right? So we put in some guardrails and we say like, hey, never scale endlessly in one or in the other direction. So never go to 0 or never go below 2, because in the worst case, like this is going to be hugely expensive. Right? So this is what I mean, or what we mean when we work on this paper here, is that we say like, hey, what we need to have in our system that I don't even have to look at, right? Because I trust it to make the right decisions here, right? It's just looking at the load, it's making good decisions. Even in some corner cases where the other system would go out of bounds, it's just making a good judgment call that I don't have to worry about. It would mean full autonomy, right? The system can just do that kind of work. Yeah, so this was one example. Also have, let's say, instrumentation as another example, because this is like background also a little bit more. I'm an OpenTelemetry maintainer, so this is where I feel home. And this is also an endless debate that we have in this community, like what level of instrumentation should we be doing. But suddenly the rise of AI, you recognize like people are like, wait a minute, actually AI can help us a lot in this area, right? I mean, you can do all of them manually, so you can sit down and add your traces and logs and metrics manually. Or hopefully you have an IDE that can autocomplete that, that's kind of assistance. Or maybe you have so-called instrumentation libraries, so you have some code that is pre-instrumented for you already, so you don't have to worry about it, but it's very static still. Then of course you have automatic instrumentation, right? Things like an injector, getting Kili's attention there in the back. He's one of the maintainers of that, so thank you to him. There's a lot of cool things you can do already at that level, right? I mean, we had this conversation just a few minutes ago. This gives you 90%. This gives you 90% of the instrumentation that you need in all the world, right? I mean, you add something to your cluster, you add something to your Linux service, or like instrument all the services here, give me my logs, my metrics, and my traces. But then it gets really interesting because you then can say like, hey, but the rest I do with an LLM. And then it's again like, it's not a question of like, can the LLM do this fully automatically? Can it be an AI SRE I don't have to look for anymore? Because this in the end is still like, hey, I'm not looking at this anymore. I trust the system what it is doing. And so it's always that debate, and then I have another example, but I think maybe we skip that. So you could do, of course, the same with incident prevention. I think actually it's important because it's like the one thing we started with, right? So at the beginning, like back in the days, people had no alerting. I guess some time existed where people were like, oh, my server is not running anymore, so let me check a little bit. Then they had maybe some scripts to fix things because people were calling them and telling them like, hey, something is not working. And then, cool, now we have linear automation where we say like, hey, you get an alert, but the human maybe still needs to run a script because the situation is way too complex, right? They still need to look into all the systems, what's going on, what's the problem, they need to troubleshoot. And then maybe the first versions of like auto-remediation are just conditions again, right? Where we say like, a thing like I have been talking about, I think 8 or 9 years ago already, was something like, you do a deployment, you check the deployment, you see the error rates are going high, so you roll back the version of the deployment, so you do the group redeployments, canary releases, whatever. Like we have a lot of those mechanisms already. And then again, at the higher levels, it's about like, okay, the LLM can help us with those kinds of high automation, figuring out like, okay, there's an incident, and if there's something wrong, let me look at that, give you some hypothesis. And the last step is again like, what do we need to trust the system, right? What do we need to say like, you know what, I can go fully hands-off, you're running this on your own, you're doing the detection, the prevention and everything on your own. I think it's a big hard part. Yeah, and that brings me back, and again, like it's very similar to your slides, right? I mean, reliability is still an engineering job, so everybody who's an SRE should not be worried about being replaced. I mean, many of you are developers. I mean, your job just has changed, right? I mean, it's hard right now and much more complicated, but like there's still a big team of things that we're doing. The thing I presented here and talk about here, this is really what we want to build in this white paper, is give you that kind of map, to understand like, where are we maybe, like what level of automation have we accomplished, what is maybe the next thing we could do, maybe even have a common glossary and words to talk about those things. Yeah, and then last but not least, also maybe getting a little bit of peace of mind to say like, wait a minute, I don't need an LLM to fix everything. And this brings me back to the door handles. I'm not sure if you read that, but like some cars now have this electronic door handles, and then like when they get into an accident, like you can no longer open them because they have no electricity and people died because of that. And I'm like, yeah, I want manual door handles. There was like a point where it was like, I don't want electricity in there, I don't know, could you put an AI in a door handle? Probably, but for what reason? I mean, it would just be crazy. So let's say, the thing maybe I can give you a little bit of this peace of mind to say like, look, we can use LLMs for a lot of things. Maybe there's a lot of places where human rationality could fix those things. And then back to the initial thing about the AI SRE, right? This is something I'm probably thinking a lot about right now, and maybe have to do another talk at some point in time. So it's just another agent, right? Last time I counted, there were 67 AI SRE solutions I found. I guess there's another 100 I did not hear about. I know that companies are building their own, so I'm curious if anybody of you is building some kind of AI SRE right now on your own, like your own company version of it. So
own team version, very small one.
Okay, yeah.
Trying out something.
That's the interesting thing. There's probably another 1,000 where people say like, why not build my own, right? Like I have my alerting system, I have my GitHub or whatever on the end of it, and I have my observability solution, like Bronto, for example, or cluster API, my cloud APIs, etc. I can build this thing on my own, right? I can build a very early version of this on my own. It brings me kind of back to like another age-old discussion around like, what do I buy and what do I build, right? I mean, this is a very individual decision. It's just a tool among many, right? It's not the one thing that will replace everything. So, yeah. And with that, once again, just call to action. So if you're interested in this topic, right? If you say like, hey, I want to talk with people about I'm an SRE, I'm just curious what those people are up to. There's, let's say, a link you can follow. I think we meet this Thursday evening. If you're curious, but we're also trying to do a lot of the vertical sync. So if you look into the white paper and if you think like, hey, that paragraph here is bullshit, they comment on it and tell us like, what do you think about it? Right? Because I always think like those kind of collaborations, those kind of white papers, they make the most sense the more people are contributing to it and have a diverse perspective. So yeah, this is kind of hidden invite to tell everybody, look at this please and help us with that. And yeah, and that's my thank you at that point.